Once upon a time, but wait, what if I told you that fairy tales aren't just children's stories? What if these ancient tales hold the secrets to understanding your own mind? Hi, I'm Dr. Bren, and welcome to another deep dive here in the Genius Circle community. Today, we're exploring something that bridges ancient wisdom with modern psychology, something I'm deeply passionate about sharing with you. As we continue our journey together in understanding the depths of human psychology, I want to take you into the fascinating world of fairy tale interpretation through a Jungian lens. This isn't just academic theory, it's practical wisdom that can transform how you understand yourself and your life story. Carl Jung, the famous depth psychologist, made a revolutionary discovery. Fairy tales are mirrors of the human psyche. They're not just entertainment, they're profound psychological documents that carry the collective wisdom of the unconscious mind. Jung believed these stories emerged straight out of the unconscious of people who never studied psychology. They're pure expressions of how the psyche naturally organizes itself, deals with conflict, and moves toward wholeness. Today we're diving deep into why these once-upon-a-time stories still matter to us as adults, how they can guide us toward healing and growth, and most importantly, how you can use this wisdom in your own life journey. This is preparation for our upcoming exploration of the handless maiden. But the principles we'll learn apply to every fairy tale you've ever heard. Why do fairy tales still captivate us? The answer lies in their origin. These stories didn't come from individual authors sitting at desks. They emerged spontaneously from what Jung called the collective unconscious, the deeper layer of psyche we all share. Marion Woodman, a brilliant Jungian analyst, explained that fairy tales show us how the unconscious works unimpeded by conscious intervention. They're like psychological X-rays. They reveal the underlying structure of how we naturally process life's challenges. Think about the universality of these themes. Every culture has stories of heroes facing impossible odds, wise old women offering magical help, dark forests that must be entered, treasures that are hard to attain. These aren't cultural accidents, they're archetypal patterns, fundamental blueprints of human experience that transcend time and geography. Woodman called these ancient tales gold mines of information for understanding why we behave as we do, even against our conscious intentions. When you find yourself repeating patterns you don't understand, fairy tales can offer profound insights into the unconscious forces at play. The images in fairy tales are deliberately simple and stark. The wicked stepmother, the brave little tailor, the sleeping princess. This simplicity isn't primitive, it's sophisticated. These clear archetypal images bypass our rational defenses and speak directly to the unconscious mind. Marie-Louise von Franz, Jung's closest collaborator, made a revolutionary observation. Fairy tales are the purest and simplest expression of collective unconscious psychic processes. Unlike complex myths with elaborate cultural details, fairy tales are stripped down to psychological essentials. This makes them incredibly valuable for understanding fundamental human emotions and conflicts. Jung himself noted that fairy tales give symbolic form to unconscious processes, helping us reconnect our conscious minds with deeper, hidden layers of our psyche. Let me give you a concrete example. In the Russian tale, Vasilisa the Beautiful, a young girl must enter a dark forest to seek wisdom from the terrifying witch Baba Yaga. On the surface, it's a simple adventure story. Psychologically, it's a profound map of what happens when we courageously enter our own unconscious to gain insight. Jung saw this process as fundamentally healing. He believed that many psychological problems stem from a split between our conscious awareness and our unconscious wisdom. When we repress feelings we don't understand or ignore intuitive guidance, we create what Jung called neuroses. But here's the crucial insight. The characters in fairy tales aren't just external figures. They represent different aspects of our own psyche. The wicked witch might be your harsh inner critic. The wise old woman could be your intuitive guidance. The brave prince represents your potential for courageous action. Jung wrote that a living symbol from a story can unite our rational mind with our soul's imagination, sparking inner transformation. This is why fairy tales have survived for centuries. They're not just entertainment, they're medicine for the soul. Marie-Louise von Franz devoted her career to developing a systematic method for interpreting fairy tales. She believed that the fairy tale itself is its own best explanation, meaning we must pay careful attention to every single detail, because each element is psychologically meaningful. Von Franz viewed each fairy tale as what she called a relatively closed system that expresses one essential psychological drama through its sequence of symbolic events. Her method has 3 precise steps. Step 1, structural analysis. You break down the tale's narrative skeleton like a literary archaeologist. Identify the exposition. What's the initial situation? Who are the main characters? The hero, the helpers, the villains. What's the central problem or conflict that drives the story? Where's the turning point or climax, and how does it resolve? Von Franz noticed that fairy tale structures are deceptively simple but deeply purposeful. Most follow a pattern. Something vital is missing or cursed, representing psychological lack or woundedness. Then comes a quest or trial, the hard work of growth. Finally, wholeness is restored, representing psychological integration. This structure itself reveals the psychological plot. Step 2, amplification of symbols. This is detective work across cultures and time. You interpret each symbol by comparing it with parallels in other myths, dreams, and folklore. If a fairy tale features a king who falls ill, you research other stories of ailing kings to understand what this represents. Von Franz found that an ill king often symbolizes a psyche in need of renewal. A descent into a dark forest parallels the archetypal night sea journey, the hero's descent into the unconscious. A magical helper represents the assistance that comes from the self, Jung's term for the wise, organizing center of the psyche. This amplification process reveals what von Franz called archetypal resonance, the universal human meaning that transcends any single story or culture. Step 3, psychological translation. Now you translate the entire story into psychological language. The external adventure becomes an internal journey. Characters represent different aspects of a single psyche, often the listener's or dreamer's psyche. For example, a conflict between a cruel stepmother and an innocent girl might represent the struggle between negative self-criticism and vulnerable authenticity within one person's mind. The fairy tale's happy ending, marriage, treasure, healing, symbolizes achieving what Jung called individuation, a new harmony or wholeness in the personality. Von Franz insisted on moving beyond simple moral lessons to identify real inner dynamics, psychological complexes, archetypal energies, and stages of personal growth depicted in the story. The question becomes, what problem of the soul is this story grappling with, and what resolution does it suggest? Let me share the insights from the brilliant minds who've illuminated this path for us. because each brings a unique perspective to fairy tale wisdom. Jung himself saw fairy tales as essential expressions of what he called the collective unconscious, that deeper layer of psyche we all share. He noted that retelling a myth or fairy tale causes unconscious processes to come alive again and be recollected, reconnecting our conscious and unconscious minds and helping to heal what he called psychic splits. Jung was fascinated that the same archetypal motifs appear at all times and in all parts of the world in fairy tales. To him, this proved that a universal psyche is at work. Engaging with these tales was a way to tap into age-old wisdom and promote individuation, his term for the lifelong process of becoming your authentic self. Von Franz took this further, devoting her entire career to fairy tale interpretation. She called them the purest and simplest psychic narratives because they come without elaborate cultural trappings. They're direct transmissions from the unconscious. Von Franz believed fairy tales show us solutions to common human problems. In her analysis, if a tale ends with a once impoverished character becoming royalty, psychologically, this might mean that a person who initially lacked self-worth has integrated some powerful new capacity, essentially elevating what Jung called the inferior function to a place of strength. Every detail matters in von Franz's approach. The golden hair, the 3 siblings, the 12 midnight strikes, all are clues to the story's deeper meaning. Marion Woodman brought a crucial focus on feminine psychology and the body-soul connection. She was particularly interested in how fairy tales illuminate women's psychological journey and what she called the dark goddess archetype, those frightening feminine figures like witches and crones that appear in so many stories. Woodman showed that confronting the dark feminine, often personified as witches, old crones, or devouring mothers in fairy tales, is crucial for both women's and men's creative and spiritual growth. She used stories like The Handless Maiden in workshops to help women heal from trauma and reclaim their power. Woodman taught that fairy tales give us a safe container to process our own pain, desires, and transformations. As she put it, if you're puzzled by some baffling behavior pattern in yourself, the old stories often hold answers. They show how others unconsciously navigated the same psychological territory. Robert Johnson made Jungian insights accessible to everyday people. He frequently used myths and fairy tales to illustrate psychological principles, writing books like The Fisher King and The Handless Maiden that diagnose modern emotional wounds through ancient stories. Johnson showed how medieval tales describe what he called the wounded feeling function in our culture, the way many men have lost touch with their emotions, like the melancholy Fisher King, and many women feel disempowered or cut off from their creative capacity, like the Handless Maiden. Johnson's key teaching was to approach fairy tales with open imagination. He told students to ask, where am I in this story? Which character or motif resonates with what I'm going through? This reflection can yield powerful insights for personal development. As he put it, when we learn to think in the language of myth and symbol, we begin to hear and to understand the lessons our psyche is offering. Now let's get practical. How do we actually use this ancient wisdom for personal growth? The Jungian approach offers several powerful methods that you can start using immediately. First, reflect on resonance. When you read or hear a fairy tale, pay attention to what draws you in emotionally. Do you identify with the humble third son, the dumbling, who everyone underestimates but who ultimately succeeds? or with the adventurous girl who ventures into the woods despite warnings. Perhaps a particular image gives you a strong feeling. A tower might evoke claustrophobia, a forest might spark excitement or fear, a magical helper might fill you with hope. These reactions are clues to your own inner landscape. Ask yourself, where have I felt like this hero or heroine in my life? Where do I recognize this villain or obstacle? If Jack and the Beanstalk resonates with you, maybe you're facing a situation that requires taking a big risk to overcome a giant problem. The story suggests you might have more bravery and cleverness than you think, and there could be gold to be gained by facing your fears. Second, engage imaginatively. Jungian analysts often use what Jung called active imagination with fairy tales. Revisit a story in your mind. Picture yourself entering that fairy tale world and see what unfolds. Dialogue with the characters. Ask the wise old woman for advice or inquire why the dragon is so angry. Marion Woodman taught that the unconscious responds to symbols, not logical arguments. So, working with fairy tale imagery through art, journaling, or meditation can help resolve inner dilemmas that rational thinking can't touch. If you feel stuck in life, imagine what the hero or heroine in your favorite tale would do next. It might inspire you to break out of your usual patterns. The key is treating the story as a living thing inside your psyche, not just an old fable collecting dust. Third, look beyond surface morals to symbolic meaning. Many fairy tales have obvious lessons. Be kind and you'll be rewarded, or slow and steady wins the race. But the Jungian approach invites us deeper. Take the handless maiden, which we'll explore in depth soon. The surface moral might be about perseverance and faith, but symbolically it's about a young woman who loses her hands, her ability to grasp and act in the world, due to a deal with the devil. This is a powerful image for what happens when one's inner feminine spirit is wounded by destructive external forces. The story then shows a journey of regrowth through innocence, divine help, and love. For someone reading this tale, the meaning might be deeply personal, recognizing how they've felt disempowered in their own life and finding hope that through integrity and support, they can heal and regain their agency. Finally, embrace the journey, not just the ending. In fairy tales, happily ever after comes only after traveling through uncertainty and trials. This reminds us that personal growth is a process, not an instant fix. If you find yourself in a dark forest period of life, fairy tales can reassure you that this often precedes finding the light. Robert Johnson puts it beautifully. While our real lives are much longer and more complex than a 10-page fairy tale, we are multi-volume heroes of our own stories. One difficult chapter doesn't mean it's the end. These tales collectively affirm that transformation is possible. Curses can be lifted, lost children can find their way home, and dormant potential, the sleeping beauty within us, can awaken. By keeping these symbolic narratives in mind, we can navigate our own life story with more courage, wisdom, and imagination. Here's what makes fairy tales so enduringly powerful. They don't just tell us about transformation, they actually facilitate it. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves, captures this beautifully when she says, "Stories are medicine. They have such power. They do not require that we do, be, act anything. We need only listen." This points to something profound. Sometimes just hearing a fairy tale can touch something deep inside us and set healing in motion. We don't necessarily have to analyze it intellectually. The imagery itself works on us over time, like seeds planted in the unconscious that sprout when we're ready. Jung understood this when he wrote that a living symbol from a story can unite our rational mind with our soul's imagination, sparking transformation we couldn't achieve through willpower alone. The fairy tale becomes a bridge between different parts of ourselves. Different fairy tales illuminate different phases of what Jung called the individuation process, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are. Some stories focus on shadow integration, facing the parts of ourselves we'd rather deny. Others explore anima and animus development, cultivating our inner feminine and masculine aspects. Still others point toward what Jung called the self, that wise, whole center of our being. This is why fairy tales have survived for centuries, while other forms of entertainment fade. They're not just stories, they're technologies of transformation developed by the collective wisdom of humanity over thousands of years. As we wrap up this exploration, remember that fairy tales endure because they speak to something fundamental in the human soul. They're not just about magic kingdoms and far-off lands. They're about the magic of transformation that's available to each of us, right here, right now. Jung, von Franz, Woodman, Johnson, and the other wisdom keepers we've discussed today all understood this. Fairy tales are mirrors that show us who we are, challengers that inspire us to grow, and guides that point us toward healing in ways no straightforward advice ever could. As we prepare for our deep dive into the handless maiden in our next session, carry this understanding with you. Approach that story and every fairy tale you encounter, not as entertainment, but as an invitation to dialogue with the deepest parts of yourself. The next time you hear Once Upon a Time, remember, that time might be now. Your own story of growth, healing, and becoming who you truly are is always just beginning. What fairy tale speaks to your soul? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're ready to explore more about psychology and personal growth, subscribe for more insights that bridge ancient wisdom with modern understanding.